Part of a long history, a long multi-part documentary history film project I've been working on. It's possible to get those lights all the way down. This is the complete history of communism. This is part 5, Communism in North Korea. I trust all of you have paid careful attention to Complete History of Communism Part 1 about Karl Marx and the writing of the Communist Manifesto. You've of course also seen and committed to memory Complete History of Communism Part 2, which is about the Paris Commune of 1871. Then of course there was Complete History of Communism Part 3 about the Russian Revolution of 1917. And Complete History of Communism Part 4, which was Communism in China, which brings us up to date here with Complete History of Communism Part 5, Communism in North Korea, and it goes like this. Korea is a mid-sized land, surrounded by China and Russia and Japan. A humble nation surrounded by 3 mighty forces. Long ago it was known as the Hermit Kingdom, isolated from the world but self-sufficient. Korea had its own language and inventions and resources. But when the rest of the world reached colonial times, Europe and Japan both wanted that colonial prize. East and West wanted Korea. Who would win? It was Japan that annexed Korea in 1910. And life under the Japanese was cruel, but Korean landlords and police helped them rule. The vicious Japanese imperialists and the richest Koreans all collaborated. And the first Korean communist was a woman in Russia, Alexandra Kim. She was killed by the Japanese, but a few Koreans joined in. Maybe communism could get rid of the Japanese conquerors they all hated. And the Korean Communist Party was just a few people at best, but one was Kim Sung-ju, a teenage student who got arrested. When Kim got out, he fled and joined Mao's Red Chinese Army. He fought in China, not Korea, but he fought the Japanese. So a legend spread back in Korea about this Korean army commander fighting in China. Kim Il-sung, meaning become the sun, became the new name of this star. And when Kim was the last commander left alive in his section, and the Japanese had his troops down to a fraction, he led his last men to safety across a river to the USSR. And so the next chapter in Kim Il-sung's life began. He left Mao's army and was retrained as a Soviet army man. He fought in Stalin's army all through World War II, and when the Japanese were crushed, it was Korea's dream come true. But like Germany, after the Nazis were finished, Korea was also in question with the Japanese banished. Would it be the communist East or the capitalist West that would give Korea direction? So just like the new East and West Germany, a similar decision fell to cut Korea in half along the 38th parallel, the North to Stalin's Russia and the South to America's protection. And Stalin picked Kim Il-sung to be the leader of the North. Syngman Rhee was the South's leader that America put forth. And through the late 40s was a big propaganda fight. Both called the other one a puppet, and both of them were right. Well, one big problem with North Korea, to be fair, there were very few Korean communists even there. The leaders were mostly foreigners from China and from the Soviet Union. But then on the other hand, one big problem with South Korea, to be fair, was that America put back in power all the rich Koreans there. All those bad ones who collaborated with Japan came right back to rule them. And another irony is that Korea did have its own communist party, but they were based down in the South where they just couldn't get things started. Meanwhile, both leaders were like pawns hoping to be kings. Both wanted permission to attack the other and conquer everything. In 1950, Kim got Stalin's permission, and he sent the North Korean troops across the border on a conquering mission. The South Koreans fled, just like Kim hoped was gonna happen. But Kim underestimated how much America was committed. He thought the US wouldn't send troops into Korea, but we did. So it was his turn to flee back north, because it was America's excuse to see him flattened. But then it was quickly America's turn for a disastrous turnabout. We hadn't thought the giant communist Chinese army would come out. So the so-called Korean War was really Americans versus Chinese, with poor Korea in the crossfire of this mini World War III. Well, we reinforced wars with new technologies like napalm, but the Chinese seemed endless. There was talk of using an A-bomb, and for 3 horrible years there was slaughter, and neither side was winning. Till China and America both backed off because they were even, but with millions of Koreans dead and cities destroyed for no reason, the country was divided exactly the same as it had been in the war's beginning. And Kim still wanted more power, but still needed Russia and China's help, so the only rivals he could get rid of were Korean communists themselves. Then he told everyone to believe in Juche, his philosophy of self-reliance, and he really did approve North Korea's economy and science. So North Korea prospered for a time, but by the 70s it started to decline. And old Kim picked his son, Kim Jong-il, to lead in case of his departure. And North Korea even started nuclear power programs, but the economy just kept slowing and slowing. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, North Korea lost its most important economic partner. And just like a metaphor for all the growing problems of his paths, old Kim grew a neck tumor they had to crop from photographs. In fact, it grew so large it got in fistfights with his kid. Okay, that part didn't really happen, but it would have been crazy if it did. And nowadays, North Korea is a hermit kingdom once again, ruled by Kim Jong-il and his army men, isolated from the world, but even worse than it ever had been in the past. But if North Korea can continue to get rid of its nukes tomorrow, it can still become an example for the rest of the world to follow. Maybe trade sanctions will lift, the people will rise up and make their own fate at last. Which brings us right to Complete History of Communism Part 6, which is Communism in Cuba, but we don't have time for that one this evening.